What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bischoff and Brown right here on the Detroit Lions podcast. He's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. We are back. Lions free agency, not necessarily in the books because it's pretty much the first day, yesterday and today, essentially. But a lot of things happening, a lot of moving parts. We're going to talk about all that. But before we do, Scott, my man, how the hell are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
We're good. We're good. Recording in the basement again, this time in the office. So going to see how this one shapes up. Haven't done this yet. I already hate this light above my head. So we're going to have to move this and figure this out. But we're going to figure it out. So we'll keep it moving and all that good stuff. But lots to get into as just far as the general scheme of things with the Lions and how the roster is starting to shape up with free agency and all that stuff. Losing guys, Kevin Zeitler is gone. Carlton Davis is gone. Ifeatu Melifonwu is gone. They brought back a couple of their own guys, Levi Ozarike, Miles Adams, a lot of stuff on the defensive line, but really no names were bigger than these two right here. Cornerback DJ Reed and defensive tackle Roy Lopez. Didn't really expect DJ Reed, to be completely honest with you. I was not expecting a bigger cornerback name. I just wasn't. I figured if anything, they would try to get Carlton Davis back. And if not, they would pivot to I don't want to say a lesser name, but maybe a smaller contract type of guy. But 3 years, $48 million, $36 million guaranteed for DJ Reed. To me, and we haven't seen the whole structure of the deal, very similar to what they did with Cam Sutton. It was a 3-year, $33 million deal for Sutton when he signed a couple years back, and it was $22 million guaranteed. So kind of the same structure is what I'm going to guess. And I like that because you can get out of the deal after a year or two. So we'll see, obviously, what the financials look like in the coming weeks. But starting with DJ Reed, what did you think of the signing, and how do you think he fits here with us in Detroit?
It's a bummer to lose Carlton Davis because he was cornerback one. But I'm not sure that I would call DJ Reed a consolation prize. I think they're similar-ish kind of players. Maybe Davis has a little bit better ball skills than Reed does, but I think Reed's a little tighter in his coverage than Davis was. Reed is smaller, but he's got some dog in him. He's going to hit you. He's going to play. He's a very physical player. I love the signing. I think that the one of the things that going into free agency was the concern around if you did lose Davis and you didn't have, a savvy veteran who knew, who could hold up as cornerback one, then you're sort of pushing a little early. You'd be pushing Terry and Arnold into that slot, and that left me feeling just a touch uncomfortable. Like there's a little uncertainty there. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why I think the Reed signing is awesome, is because it allows Arnold to continue to grow, and sometimes it's not the. Arnold improved over his rookie season. If you take it in blocks, I think he struggled the first 4 or 6 weeks with how physical and how touchy he was in coverage, and he kind of figured that out to where he wasn't getting called for those things as much over the back half of the season, and I think he was a lot better. And I think everybody should be very optimistic about what he is as a player, but having him not have to ascend to the top of their depth chart as a second-year player takes a little bit of pressure off.
Yeah.
And I think Reed is one of those guys who's going to welcome some of that pressure. I love it. I think that's a great signing. If you were going to lose Carlton Davis, that's the kind of guy you'd be very happy about. Again, it's not a consolation prize. I think they're both like cornerback one kind of players. What do you think? What do you think of it?
I like the move a lot. I think it's a really solid move for the Lions to get a player that has a similar skill set to Tyrion Arnold. And when I watch Arnold play, he's a physical guy that can run in stride with receivers, and he doesn't always get his head around because he's too busy working downfield, working through contact that's being given back to him by receivers, and he's not going to, withstand for that and all that. So he's going to withstand through that contact and play and all that. But when I watch DJ Reed, it's kind of the same thing. Like against Arizona, he got flagged maybe middle of the second quarter or something like that. Didn't get his head around, and I'm like, man, am I watching Tyrion Arnold all over again? But he runs step for step with guys, and he's always prepared for those in-breaking routes. So I really love what I'm seeing there. So vertical routes, the dig routes, the post, the slant, a crosser, whether it's mesh, I'm assuming the Lions are still going to run a lot of man coverage. So that's important. And that's where they got beat at times. Guys like Carlton Davis just at times would lose those reps. Arnold would lose those reps. Now you get a guy that maybe takes away half of the field because he doesn't really lose those reps. He's always kind of in position to make a play, and he can close really fast. And that's what really stood out to me was how fast he closes to the football and the communication aspect. Like there are times where if you're playing in zone, you got to play to your rules. Like if you're got to cover 3 and you got the deep safety over the middle of the field and you've got the, an outside third of the field, sometimes you can't get too deep because you have a route underneath and you have to trust the safety's going to pick that up. And there are times on film where he communicates that and knows exactly where his zone drop off begins and ends and all of those things. So I love seeing that stuff on tape from him. I love the physicality, like I mentioned, and I think it's just a great signing. I would have never signed Carlton Davis for $20+ million a year. Just no offense to him. I just wouldn't. He hasn't played in 13 games or more in 5 straight seasons.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't pay that amount. I would have paid $14, $15, $16 million for sure, but not 20+. And that's what he got to go to New England. That's fine. I'll take DJ Reed all day long. He fits exactly what they're looking for. Ball skills aren't always there. He's not always going to pick the football off, but he's always going to be around the football. So
to me, he strikes me as, if you're a receiver, I think I would love to talk to those guys. Like who's a pain in the ass to play against? My guess is his name would come up because he's kind of a smothering presence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the data. I don't, but I wonder, my guess is he's a little better than Davis was as far as how much separation he allowed, if that makes sense. He's very sticky in coverage. And I love the idea of him coming up, hitting against the run. You can trust him. He's going to play leverage. He's going to do everything that you want. And again, it allows a player like Arnold to continue to grow. It allows Rakestraw to continue to grow. I think it pushes Amik where he should be playing at times. They have versatility and flexibility kind of everywhere in that room now. I like it. I think it was really good. Moving to losing Melifonwu was interesting, and I know we'll get to this more at the end of what when we talk about the draft stuff, but it almost puts safety as a position of need. And I know you've drafted 2 recently, but you kind of do need more there, right? But
depth, yeah.
Yeah, you need depth, and you need some playmaking, and it'll be interesting to see what happens at 28. It's that's one of the positions where I do feel a little sense of security around the draft, where at some other positions I feel like at pick 28 it's going to be like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
All the edges are gone. So maybe safety is something that they'll look at. I don't know, but they've lost some guys, right? But to me, Melifonwu didn't play much last year because he was hurt a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of been the story of his career.
Mm-hmm.
You replace Carlton Davis with DJ Reed. I don't want to say, I don't think it's a downgrade by any stretch.
Yeah.
So I think you're sort of even there, and the whole tone of the Lions free agency, and it's something I think Lions fans really need to embrace and understand. is that, while other teams are bringing in big name dudes, older guys, and paying them, the Lions are returning all of their elite players, especially on defense. The Lions are returning their studs from injury. Mm-hmm. So there is no free agent available who is Aiden Hutchinson.
Right.
There's no free agent available who's Aleem McNeil. There just isn't.
Yeah.
I know they're returning from pretty catastrophic injuries, right? But there's no reason to think that they're not going to be back in some way, shape, or form like they were before.
Yeah.
And that's the priority, right? So I understand the frustration around, the Bears making moves and the Vikings making moves and all this stuff. But, go ahead. Go.
I was just going to throw this question out because, and it's for the people. I mean, send it in the chat, whatever you got to do in the comments, reach out to us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, at Bischoff_Scott. But how many teams spend a bunch of money in free agency, go on and win a bunch of games the next year or the year after? Those teams that spend a bunch of money end up getting in cap hell, and they have a ton of dead cap space that they've got to worry about in 2 to 3 years. Look at the Tennessee Titans. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars last year in free agency. They won, 3 games? They
had the first pick.
Number 1 overall pick. And I get it. They don't have a quarterback. It's different. Like the Bears have Caleb Williams, and they're doing things. They're building around him. They're putting around key players and positions and all that. And I get that. But it is a lot of money spent. So if it doesn't work out for the first-year head coach and a second-year quarterback that struggled year 1, you're in for a world of hurt in years 2 and 3 and things like that. And the same can be said for every other team that's spending all this money right now in what was said to not be a great free agency class. I mean, it really wasn't a great free agency class. There were some names at the top, but I mean, we're seeing
the Lions situation is very different than some of those other teams. Like the Lions are paying Goff a ton of money, right? The Bears are paying Caleb Williams a lot of money, but it's not, 50 plus, it's not 45 million a year or whatever it is. The Vikings are a team that scares me a touch because with McCarthy on a rookie deal and some of what they've added, that was a team that was 14-3 last year.
Yeah.
They're a little scary, but what are you going to do? Right. So,
well, and it's clear, too, that what their goal is this offseason. They want to stop us from running the football, right? Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, just trying to get bigger bodies. And I know some of those guys aren't necessarily great against the run, but it's clear what some of the teams in our division, what they were trying to do. Just eliminate some of the things that Detroit does really well because they'll shape up pretty well and match up pretty well against the other teams, whether it's the Packers, the Bears, whatever. So it's going to be really interesting on that, but
it really is. And the takeaway, the whole thing is, do you want to make a splash signing? Do you want to do something cute in free agency right now and potentially lose the ability to re-sign Kirby Joseph or Jamison Williams or Brian Branch when they're up because you don't have necessarily the money to do it? I know you could always find money. Like they could restructure Goff today and find, $20 million on the cap. They could
restructure Glasgow, so on and so forth.
But I don't know that the Lions should be in the business of doing that and putting themselves in a rough position down the road. I don't think that's what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are looking to do.
Yeah.
But in the end, this is a 15-2 football team returning elite players on their defense. And that's the approach to free agency, is bolstering some of that. Now, are they done? No. I mean, we're going to talk about Roy Lopez in a second, but are they done? No, I think they'll add an edge player. I know they've been talking to Von Miller. Whether or not that makes anybody, warm and fuzzy. I like the idea of adding capable guys behind or with Davenport opposite Hutchinson, because we know that the injuries and even some weird stuff, it seems to kind of strike him. So I don't know that. And the way they structured his contract, they're telling him the more you play, the more you're going to make. The less you play, the less you're going to make. So I like the idea of adding, if they went into the season with Davenport and Von Miller and a top 60 edge player, whoever it is, whatever it is. Let's just say it's Nick Scorton, right? That they settle on at pick 28, whatever it is. I think I would feel pretty good about that.
Mm-hmm.
So the player opposite Hutchinson is one of those three guys, or all three of those guys at different situations in the game, different down and distance kind of stuff. I think that's good.
Yeah.
You brought back Onwuzurike. I think that helps to buffer the potential of not having McNeil early. And then there's Roy Lopez. And I know you wrote about him before free agency.
Yeah.
Tell everybody what you saw.
This was a guy that, getting into free agency, really started paying attention to some of the names that were out there, looking at the bigger names. But realistically, I knew that the Lions weren't going to be splashy. Like DJ Reed caught me off guard, as I mentioned, but I didn't expect them to go all in on Joey Bosa and all in on this guy and all in on all these other guys. I just know realistically, that's not what the Lions are going to do. I know you can see what Brad Holmes, as we've been talking about, how he values salary cap, how he values his picks, how he values his time. And I knew that they were going to go a different approach from what everybody else wanted to see, because the big names are fun and sexy, but Roy Lopez was a name that nobody talked about because it's just not a sexy name. It's just not. So I'm looking and I'm like, I'm going to watch this guy. And I start watching him and I just couldn't stop. And it was like, this guy was a gritty interior defender that just fit our profile so well with what the Lions have been doing on the interior part of their defensive line. He can play as a 2-eye, he can play as a nose, and he's primarily a nose, but he's shaded a lot, so he's going to be a zero shade on a center. And he might be left-handed, just judging by the way that he really hits that post step and extends out and tries to. He lacks length there, so he's always going to be kind of chest and tight, but he's strong and he holds his own at the point of attack. So he's going to create some separation the best that he can. It's going to be short arm, kind of T-Rex-like, but he's going to hit you with a push-pull. He's going to hit you with an arm over. And really, he just fights laterally. So when teams are trying to reach block him, or they're going to, try to run duo on him, and they're going to gallop technique and hit him and then try to get somebody to the linebacker, that stuff's not going to really happen against Roy Lopez as much. And if it does, that's fine, because Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone should be free, because he does a good enough job with withstanding and holding his ground just long enough where that center or that guard and that tackle, they have to stay there long enough to keep him there. And that allows that linebacker or safety or whoever's coming down, it just allows them to play free. And I think guys like Pascal and Hutch are going to really benefit on the outside. It should free them up one-on-one a little bit. The same with Reeder and McNeil. So I think it's a great move because he's powerful, he's strong, he gives them just another body in the middle that we know they desperately need, especially against the run. Yeah, but he generated over 9% interior pass rush, rate, according to, I think it was Pro Football Focus, and it was one of the highest of all the defensive tackles in the free agent market, and he signs for under $5 million. I think it was maybe 5.5 at the most. Yeah. And some of these guys are signing for 11 and 12 and $15 million a year. And here the Lions are just kind of fleecing everybody by getting Roy Lopez, who's going to play 40-50% of the snaps and get you a 9% pressure rate. So,
yeah, I mean, if you look at what Lopez got paid and what Onwuzurike got paid, you would think that the Lions are doing business using a different calculator than other teams, right? But those are important guys. Lopez strikes me as a dude who's just going to give you everything he's got, every snap that there is. He is a very difficult player to play against because he's heavy. He plays with really good leverage. I don't want to call him like a penetrating kind of, because that's not necessarily what he is, but he's not just a stiff, fire hydrant, one gap only nose tackle. You know what I mean? It's not like he's a nose tackle where you're going to say, hey, pick either the shoulder's left shoulder or the center's left shoulder or right shoulder and just kind of own that gap. He's capable of kind of winning either way. Yes, he has super short arms, but I think he can bench press centers. I think he's really good at doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. The push pull stuff is impressive. I think that he can give you some lateral stuff where he can show you, going one way and then through effort And that's the big thing with him is it's just all effort all the time. He can move laterally, and he'll chase stuff down or give you everything he's got not to get blocked.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing. And the nice thing is that, so DJ Reader was recovering from a torn quad the entire offseason last year. And I think it was a bit of a race for him to get healthy enough for the start of the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice this year that he has an off season where he could just keep himself in shape and just have an off season and not be rehabbing. So I think I would think that he'll give them a little bit more juice than he gave them last year. But the nice thing about Lopez is that he's going to give Reader breathers, and he's going to take snaps from Reader where you're going to get more out of Reader simply because Lopez is on the field and is capable enough as a nose, like you're saying, as a shaded one, whatever it is, to give Reader a breather. And when Reader's on the field, it may make him a better player just because, right? Because Lopez is capable of spelling him.
Yeah.
And I think that's super smart. Anytime you can sign a player to help another guy, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But from a culture standpoint, for all of it, Lopez he's what you'd want, right? I mean, it's good. It's a good signing, but it's hard to say it's splashy because it's a nose tackle and it's not a lot of money,
right?
But it's a really good team developing kind of move.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is too is he's going to help early on in the season. We've talked about this in the last couple of shows. We don't know if Aleem McNeil is going to be ready for the regular season, and you need a guy that can play from a nose to a 3-tech and pair with DJ Reader and give you valuable and productive snaps. Yeah. And Lopez is going to do that if McNeil's not ready to go. Now, if McNeil's ready to go, great. Even if it's only 20 snaps a game, perfect. Whatever the case may be. So I thought it was one that was sneaky underrated. It's going to be one that really pays off. He might not get home to the quarterback all of the time, but he's going to get close to it and force that quarterback to throw off his back foot or drift a little bit in the pocket. And when you do that to a quarterback, it throws off his mechanics and it throws off the football. So it could put a DJ Reed, a Tyrion Arnold in a better spot to make a play, intercept the football. And I think that's important. So if it all works together, then we should be, relatively okay with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole concept around, do you think disruption is production? And for me, it is. Anytime you can push a center or whatever it is, a guard, whatever, back into the quarterback to make him uncomfortable or to make him maybe short set his front foot when he's throwing the ball, sometimes that causes quarterbacks to sail the football. Anytime you can do that stuff, I don't care if you didn't get home. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Your impact is there. You can see the impact that those guys have just by making quarterbacks either throw the ball too soon or making them, like you're saying, alter their mechanics to where they're not, repeatable. Anybody who plays golf, you want, just think about a golf swing that you got to change up, and then the ball's, all over the place. That's kind of how it works with quarterbacks too. A lot of quarterbacks don't have the ability when their feet are not exactly perfect to be super accurate. Like, when I think of a player who can be accurate, no matter what his feet are doing, it's a player like Aaron Rodgers, and those guys are rare.
Yeah.
Most quarterbacks can't really be super accurate and like, in the NFL, you need to be really accurate.
Yeah.
When they're pressured or when they're feeling pressure, seeing pressure, sensing it, all that stuff, it matters. So Lopez is a guy I think that I look at as a nice depth piece who's going to give Reader some snaps off and be productive when he's on the field. Good smart signing.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned Levi Ozarike. I think that's a great ad. I like seeing Miles Adams back. We'll see what happens with guys like John Kaminsky and stuff like that. Kevin Zeitler is gone. He goes to Tennessee, so it's probably the Christian Mahogany show at right guard or left guard. I hope they move him to the left side. So
I'm with you.
Glasgow is more comfortable. It just seems like he's more comfortable on the right side throughout the course of his career. So we'll see. But the big name that was, I thought, a little surprising was that they released Zadarius Smith, the defensive end, and we know what they gave up to trade for him at the trade deadline, and they needed to. They had to make a move. This one made sense, but it also makes sense to a degree to why they let him go, because there was a bunch of roster bonuses in there that were guaranteed starting tomorrow. We're recording on Thursday, March 13th. Friday, March 14th, he was guaranteed to get a bunch of bonuses. And to kind of ensure that didn't happen and count against him on the cap, they obviously had to make the tough decision and let him go. But I'm going to assume that, like, just out of a gut feeling, I think he's going to be back. I really do. I don't know what the terms are going to be. It could be 1 year at $6 or $7 million with some incentives to do some things, but I just feel
the other part of it is that there were 3 void years that were on the back end of his contract that were going to become guaranteed a week before week 1. So multiple months from now, but still, the amount of money they would have been paying him for 1 year of service was going to be $11.9 million. Like, right. You just can't, it would have been spread out over this year and next year.
Yeah.
So you ask, could Zadarius Smith be back? That'd be a really nice move.
Yeah.
To bring him back. It'd be him, Marcus Davenport, and hopefully a draft pick. I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's good, right? But I think there's a little bit of pride that he'd have to swallow to come back to know, like, all right, well, I was going to be locked in for $11.9 million over 2 years with you guys. Now you only want to pay me $6.5 for 1.
Right.
But he may not have any other options, right? So I think an incentive, a veteran contract that's incentive heavy could be good for him. I'd love to bring him back. I think he works. I don't know how perfect he is for this scheme, and for what the Lions do, but I do like the idea of bodies that can make plays, and not trusting Davenport to stay healthy. You need a guy. You might need a guy like Zadarius Smith, and I think that would make a lot of sense to bring him back if he'd want to come back.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the kind of the next part of what we're going to be talking about is, what's this look like for the Lions in the 2025 NFL draft, specifically in the first round? Because obviously the deeper you go, you could mention the depth of just getting another defensive end or whatever the case may be. But specifically with pick 28, for weeks we've been talking about getting another defensive lineman, but now we saw them bring back Levi Ozarike. They've got Josh Paschal. They've got Marcus Davenport. They've got Aiden Hutchinson. They bring in Miles Adams. I mean, that's 5 defensive ends right there. You have Ray Lopez. You have DJ Reader, Ali McNeil. You could probably make a case for, you got Mekhi Wingo. I forgot about him. So you're kind of already running deep on the defensive line. And realistically, you're probably only going to carry 7 or 8, maybe 9 defensive linemen in total. The same thing on the offensive side of the football, because you're only going to be able to carry 22 to 23 offensive to defensive players, and the same on the other side. So, I'm sorry, 23 to 25 on one side and 23 to 25 on the other side. So you gotta have 3 for your specials, your kicker, punter, and long snapper. So you gotta think of it like that way too. So if you're going to carry 4 or 5 different linebackers and 5 or 6 defensive backs, well, next thing you know, you kind of got the number at what you're going to be, probably somewhere between 7 to 8, maybe 9 defensive linemen. So it's going to be really interesting how this shapes up if Zadarius Smith is in the works. And again, I hope he is, just because I would like to see more out of him, and I would like to see 1 year of Aiden Hutchinson healthy and Zadarius Smith on the other side with those guys behind him, as we've been discussing. But if it's not Zadarius Smith coming back and that leaves that defensive end spot open, I think at pick 28, getting a defensive lineman makes sense, whether that's Derek Harmon or Nick Scorton, which I think both of those guys, if I had to rank them 1 and 2, it'd be 1A, 1B at pick 28, because I think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are fine with either one of those players. I think they fit exactly what they're looking for. And if you're talking just scheme and just overall team, Fitz, those two guys are Detroit Lions type of players, 100% every day of the week. But I don't know what this actually means, though. I mean, like with how they've assessed this free agency period, if they sit here at pick 28 today, it kind of feels like best player available that isn't quarterback, running back, or tight end. It could be a receiver, it could be a
fortunately, running back and tight end are the two positions, two of the three I think that are the deepest.
Yeah,
not even close in this class. The other is D line. But the nice thing about bringing back Onwuzurike is you're not forced to just the combination of Lopez and Onwuzurike. You're not forced to have to take a defensive tackle. If Harmon's there and they really like him, they'll take him, and we'll all say, "Cool, really good football player," right?
Yeah.
If there's an edge that falls to them, and they feel like he's worthy of pick 28, cool. I think that makes a lot of sense. Scorton's interesting, and I know that when we first looked at the offseason stuff, we did a D line thing, and we at 280 pounds, he looks to me like Josh Pascal-ish. Yeah. But if you go back 2 years ago and you watch him at Purdue, there's a lot more. He's got a lot more twitch and a lot more explosiveness in his game than what he looked like at 280 pounds. So I would tell anybody who's looking at him at Texas A&M just to go to the Purdue film from 2 years ago.
Yeah,
and dial up the Michigan game. He gave Michigan fits in that game. So he looks like a different player at a little bit lighter weight. And I think that's he made some comments at the combine that, Texas A&M had them doing very different things. So that's the thing on Scorton. Those two guys, I think that the other two things I'd want to talk about is the potential for it to be a guard with losing Zeitler. And it's a bummer you lost Zeitler, but the Lions are positioned well, and they're positioned better to lose. To me, it's that they were positioned better to lose a guard than they were to lose an interior defensive tackle.
Yeah.
To me, that's how it felt.
Yeah.
So Zeitler walking away is a bummer. It would have been nice to run that offense back another year because that was an incredible offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's going to be a bunch of players that get drafted early that probably end up playing guard in the NFL after maybe not working out as tackles, maybe. But there's one player in particular, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, who, if he's there at 28, and I don't think he will be, because to me, he is kind of like a premium guard in this class, especially with the scheme the Lions are running, which is a lot of outside zone and power, which is weird, but that's what they've been doing. So like outside zone specifically, shouldn't say specifically, but Gibbs as an outside zone runner it's a terror. And everybody could see it last year, just how effective he was when you get him, on the edge of a defense. Good luck, right?
Yeah.
But then being able to, with the same personnel, run power concepts. And it's the same stuff. And it's kind of like toying with defenses. Like, oh, you want to go dime or you want to go nickel, we'll run power. And if you want to, play a little heavier, we're going to run outside zone. So any guard that they bring in has to have the ability to do all those things, right? And he does. And to me, he looks like a very high-end football player who will play as a guard for a long time and be productive as a guard for a long time. I don't know what you think, but I don't know that he's going to be there at 28. I'd be surprised.
If you think he's going to, if you think he's going to go sooner, then that means something.
It's not that I know something. It's just I think there's a lot of security in his game that there isn't with other players.
Right.
Do we think Tyler Booker is going to go ahead of him?
I mean,
he is a power gap scheme guard.
Yeah.
Period. I don't know that the Lions would be all that interested in him. I mean, they'd be interested in him, but I don't know that he's going to be able to be deployed in an outside zone system.
Right.
He needs to be in a phone booth.
I could see Donovan Jackson. I really could. I mean, there's kind of, I'll say it, kind of some Jonah Jackson-esque game like to him. There's kind of this game is like that, but he might be a little bit more defined than Jonah Jackson. Might not be as clunky, I guess. He seems like maybe he's a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
So I could totally see that. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with it. I think addressing the trenches is very important because Taylor Decker's 31 and, you're paying him $20 million a year and he's getting banged up. I mean, he's playing at a high level and I would love to see him play for another 4, 5, 6 years, but I know realistically that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
So he's got, I think, another 2 years left on the current deal that he's on. So if he ends up, calling it a career, you got to have some potential behind him. And I'm not saying that's Donovan Jackson, but he in a pinch, he played really well at left tackle. So
he did it. And I think he's a high-end football player. And in this class, there's a bunch of like players that you think, okay, in time, maybe.
Yeah.
I think he gives it to you right now. And then the other position, I know we talked about this earlier. I'm going to let you, I think you like talk about this guy. This is the safety position. So all of a sudden there's a need there. So I think they're good at corner. Obviously they have plenty of linebackers. Bringing back Derek Barnes is it's one that we haven't talked about yet.
Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about that. I forgot all about it.
Yeah, so I mean that's another one where okay, there's your Sam, there's your give you some blitz and with the ability to play in coverage and all that stuff. I'm excited about him coming back. I think he's a really good football player. Another guy who you just like, yeah, it's really good to have those guys around. Good football player. But safety is suddenly like, all right. On defense, it's D-line and probably safety. And if there's a player that they fall in love with, that they think is a really good player, you have a name, and I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And we're both going to talk about this probably from now until the draft about who we're going to comp him to. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think if you can get Malachi Starks in any way, and I know it's been kind of some chatter in the national media that he's going to fall to 32 to Philly or be there at 28. I don't see in any way that he's there at 28. I don't know how he gets outside of the top 15 picks, to be completely honest. I look at Miami at 13. I look at Indy at 14. Both these teams could very well take a safety like him. And if he ends up going sooner, does it anyway force Jahdae Barron down the board from Texas because he'd be another perfect fit?
He sure would.
But looking at Malachi Starks, I just think he's one of the 10, 11 best players in this draft. And he's a guy that's incredibly fluid. He's versatile. He can play inside and outside. He gets after it. I love the way that he can find the football. I think he could play as a single high for you. I love that he can cover the slot. He can man up some tight ends. He can play down in the box. There's just so much that he can do, and it fits because it kind of reminds you of like a Brian Branch in a sense. And I think if you can have another Brian Branch who can play, because that's what they did with Ifeatu Melifonwu at times. They put him down in the box, and we saw him blitz him, and he would cover the tight end, and he would cover the slot, and he would do all those things. Well, now you get rid of Melifonwu, and I know we didn't have it a lot this past year, but that forced the Lions to have 3 linebackers on the field a lot. And I don't know if I think that's what they want to do, but I don't want to say that's exactly what they want to do all the time. They want to be versatile, and they want to be able to go from that base package to a true 4-2-5 or, something with a 3 high safety look. And they want to mix and match different things. And they didn't really get to do that 2 years ago when Gardner Johnson got hurt. They didn't really get to do it this past year because Melifonwu got hurt. And so now it's like, can we get another safety into the mix? And if it's Malachi Starks, I'm 100% on board. And if it's not Malachi Starks, like I said, Jahdae Barron would be great. Wakuba from Texas is another one. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
He would be great. But my personal favorite, and if it's not Starks, it's this guy at 60. I am sprinting to the podium for Malachi Moore out of Alabama. He fits the Lions to a T. He can play multiple spots, like I've mentioned. I think he's one of the 50 best players in this draft. So Malachi Moore, Malachi Starks. Give me a Malachi, please, for this defense because we need it.
So the idea of adding Brian Branch to your defense is like, I think some people would kind of, I don't really like that. You already have Brian Branch. 2 Brian Branches, it's like it's like ordering pizza from your favorite joint. And what's better than getting one pizza, two pizzas?
Exactly.
Well, like, come on. I mean, like the versatility, the ability to interchange those guys and do different things. Yeah, it'd be really important. So as I, this draft is going to be really interesting. I think that there's potential for there to be a serious letdown at pick 28 with all the players that you like having gone in front of you, and you think, all right, there's some edges that you like, but not at 28, and there's, maybe some corners that you like, but not at 28. But this safety sitting here, man, like that guy, like that player. So that it's always nice. It's nice to feel like, Holmes is a best player available GM. He's going to continue to do that. If Starks is that, then I think everybody should be pretty excited about what that potential could be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wide receiver is an interesting position too. Maybe more at pick 60 than pick 28, but a player like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, 6'4" and 215 with some pretty good route running chops.
Yeah.
Would make some sense. But, again, pick 28 might present you some challenges with, Donovan Jackson's gone. And, all the edges that you considered taking at 28 are gone. And it's like, man, this is a bummer. But I think they'll be good. I like the way they're set up going forward. Again, returning all of their elite pieces. I didn't think. I mean, we got to talk about Hendrickson before we get out of here. I know this is a long one.
Yeah,
I don't think it's. There was a point at the deadline last year where I was wanting them to kind of make that move, but only from the frame of getting him for 1.5 years on his contract. Hendrickson, having to pay Hendrickson after paying the draft capital price to get him is something altogether different, right? I don't know that paying him $30+ million a year is something that they can do with everything else that's coming up, on top of giving up the capital you have to give up to get him. So, I don't know if that's where you are on him, if you have different ideas on Hendrickson. I think there was a desire in this offseason for Myles Garrett to be a Lion, and anything else was going to feel like a letdown. And that's kind of what feels like has happened.
Yeah.
We're not recognizing that they have elite guys who missed large portions of the season last year that they're getting back.
Yeah.
And that team still went 15-2.
Yeah.
We're good. They're good.
And I think there's this thought of like maybe it is the national media, or maybe it's local media here. I don't know, but it's like there's this window, and the window's going to close if they don't capitalize now. And it's like, well, hold on a second. They've got a relatively younger head coach. They've got a relatively younger GM. They are doing really good things early in their career. And if this is sustainable, then they should be around for the long haul, maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I don't know. Maybe it's another Patriot dynasty waiting to happen. But either way, you have guys that are doing it the right way from the top down, and that's going to carry over for years to come. So like the window should never close. The window should always be open, and there should be a draft, and you'll catch a breeze, and things are going to be good. And I don't think you have to force your hand to get a Myles Garrett because he's quote unquote available. I mean, that could be agent speak, just trying to get him land a new deal, which is exactly what he just did. What happened?
Yes.
The same thing could be happening for Trey Hendrickson, and the same thing could be happening for other players. And that's why like a Joey Bosa got released and Cooper Kupp got released, maybe because they just wanted too much money. And the organization was like, that's why we're getting rid of you. We're not dealing with that. And they knew that the price tag was never going to match what they really want for that player. So they just let it be. And I think that could be the case for Trey Hendrickson. He might end up getting a new deal and sticking it out, or he might end up getting released because it sounds like they want a first-round pick, and nobody wants to give a first-round pick for a 30-year-old edge to pay him $30 million. Like
that's the problem. Is you might have got a pretty good second-round pick or a first-round pick from somebody. Probably not a first, but you might have got a second-round pick at the deadline. And Hendrickson would have been, then you would have had him for a year and a half, and then you would have had some flexibility to do some things in and around having him already signed for this season coming up.
Yep.
But it's a totally different thing if he's demanding 30 plus million, which he should. Yeah. He's been very productive. Get every penny you can get. Absolutely. It's just the Lions have drafted Brad Holmes and Campbell, and those guys have drafted so well that they can't necessarily afford to play the free agent money game because they have too many of their own that they absolutely have to pay.
Yep.
Because their own guys are significantly better than anything that's on the free agent market.
Right.
Kirby Joseph that guy doesn't become available as a free agent because he's really good.
Exactly.
And Brian Branch shouldn't either. And Jamison Williams is going to need a deal. Hutchinson still needs his deal. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But they're all elite players. So,
well, and
the Lions are okay.
Yeah, and I mean, just think of the injury aspect of it. I mean, we saw Aiden Hutchinson go down, a young player go down on a freak play. The same thing could happen to Hendrickson, Garrett, anybody at any point in time. And they make that deal and an injury happens, guess what you're faced with? A bad contract to an injured player that will probably not be the same. And then you're going to be mad about that. So you just got to take the good with the bad. And up to this point, I think they've had a relatively good free agent signing period. They've added some good players. They've lost a couple of good ones, but I think they're going to be okay in the long haul. And they've got players waiting in the wings. Christian Mahogany, Gio Manu. I mean, there's plenty of good things coming. It sounds like. So we'll see what happens in the coming week or so if there's any more ads. But I think probably next week we'll shift our focus towards back to the draft a little bit, focus on another position and those types of things. But I mean that's pretty much the free agency aspect. From our aspect here. So you guys, of course, can rate, review, subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other podcast platforms. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter or X at Russ NFL Draft at Bischoff_Scott. You got anything else to add before we get on out of here?
No, I've done enough talking.
All right. Well, I have as well. So you guys do all those great things. We'll be back next week talking Detroit Lions with you guys. But until then, he's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. This has been Bischoff and Brown on the Detroit Lions podcast.